Well, why isn't this an unconstitutional move? Why isn't this another abrogation of free speech in Canada?
It is. And this is the thing that's so remarkable.
Oh, yeah.
Gang, what's up? Aaron, Kennedy, and Looney. This is going to be a lot of fun, guys. We're going to start off with a little story that I think shows the consequence to the friendship that Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, and Dr. Jordan Peterson, one of my favorites to watch on here, he's a brilliant mind, when they made friends. Like, we've got a lot of clips from that interview. Let's get into it. Super interesting. Love Dr. Jordan Peterson. Danielle Smith is amazing when she's amazing. I'll say that. Let's take a look and a listen, guys. Enjoy this.
When regulators begin disciplining people for simply speaking their mind on their own time, that's overreach. And at its worst, it becomes an outright threat to free expression.
Alberta's latest legislation taking aim at how professional bodies limit free speech. Its proposed Regulated Professionals Neutrality Act, limiting groups like Alberta's College of Physicians and Surgeons or the Law Society of Alberta from disciplining members for expressing opinions while not on the clock. There are some exceptions. For example, the comments cannot threaten violence or misuse the professional's position with an intent to harm. 2 years ago, Dr. Jordan Peterson, a clinical psychologist, podcaster, and author, was disciplined by Ontario's College of Psychologists for a series of online comments, including statements about transgender actor Elliot Page.
It wasn't really about incorrect information. In fact, it was more about the tone which he made his statements, which they viewed as unprofessional. And I believe they used the words dishonorable and degrading as well.
Peterson was ordered to undergo a media training program in order to keep his license. He eventually agreed after the Supreme Court refused to hear his appeal. Fear of similar discipline, the Premier believes, has kept medical professionals from speaking out in support of a recent Alberta law limiting access to transgender medical care.
We spoke to many professionals who were afraid to put their names in the public realm, not only due to the threat of public cancellation, but mainly due to fear of losing their professional status or their livelihood.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
So we might as well dive right in and attack
Let's
something
go.
simple. And so that would be Bill C-59, let's say, and the what would you say, the relationship between federal energy and environment policies and, well, let's call it the whole economy of the West and probably of Canada as well. So do you want to first lay out the territory with regard to Bill C-59? Because that was the occasion for this particular conversation.
Well, it's funny because Bill C-59 reminded me of American policymaking, where ostensibly it's about one thing, and then they stuff in hundreds of pages of other things, knowing that it has to pass, and all of those terrible other addendums are going to pass along with it. Because this is the Budget Implementation Act. It had to pass. Because in our parliamentary system, if you don't pass the budget, you end up having to go to an election. And so you're ending up having to swallow a lot of terrible policy because there's things in there that you support. Like there's things in there that we do support as well when it comes to some of the tax measures that they're taking. But what they slid in at the last minute was this crazy policy that had initially been put forward by one of our most extreme NDP members of parliament, Charlie Angus, who's not even running again. This is kind of his last-ditch effort, I guess, to try to have an influence on the national stage. And Catherine McKenna, the former environment minister as well, she has been hired on as a UN envoy on, I don't know if it's UN envoy on eco-truth or something, I don't know what it is, but it's very clear that she had an influence in sliding into this budget implementation bill, making it illegal for the energy sector, oil and gas, to talk about their positive environmental record, what they're doing to reduce emissions, the successes that they've had in addressing the environment. It's now rendered essentially illegal unless they can conform with some kind of international standard for reporting, which is undefined. Nobody knows what that is. International standard, who's setting those? What are they? No one knows. And the industry is very fearful that they're going to end up with a whole pile of frivolous lawsuits that'll bind them in the courts for months, or in our case of our country, years. And as a result, this is what has happened. The energy industry takes the path of least resistance. They want to focus on on creating prosperity and investment in developing resources. They don't want to be fighting extreme eco-justice warriors about whether or not they were overstating any particular measure of their history. So what we're seeing now is the only people who are going to be allowed in this space are those who, quite frankly, and many times are not telling the truth about our energy sector. And I think that is not good for Canada. It's not good for our province. It's really not good for the world, because we want to be the reliable provider of energy to our trade partners. And I think that they've taken us a step backwards with this, massive step backwards.
Okay, so let's delve into this a little bit. So I do remember that this bill came up, the one you're referring to that now got slotted in. This bill came up perhaps a year or a year and a half ago, and the buzz around it was that it essentially criminalized speech that was related to promotion of the fossil fuel industry. And there was enough of a furor around that, it seemed, to kill it, but obviously it just went underground and reemerged in this more serpentine form, very underhanded move. And so, so first of all, why is this not unconstitutional? Second, why can't the corporations already be prosecuted for fraud if that's actually what they're engaged in, or false advertising? And then these international standards that hypothetically exist, who sets them, even in principle? And is that an elected body, or is that some unelected cabal of top-down globalists like the UN? So let's start with the
UN.
Well, why isn't this an unconstitutional move? Why isn't this another abrogation of free speech in Canada?
It is. And this is the thing that's so remarkable, is that I was reading an analysis of the Liberals, and the Liberals are the most illiberal government we've ever had. When you look at what liberalism, classical liberalism, is supposed to stand for, it's supposed to stand for those foundational freedoms that I thought were enshrined in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, certainly enumerated in various bills of rights. And freedom of conscience and the ability to speak your mind is the first enumerated freedom. And yet it is being trampled all over, whether it's with the internet censorship bills, whether it's the hollowing out of the media and them having to scrabble after federal dollars. And I don't know what kind of strings attached are associated with that, or whether it is what we're seeing now with the speech codes, whether it's in universities, professional associations, and now this is a new speech code. It's a speech code on the energy sector. The good news is that they have a carve-out for the other orders of government. And so as the leader of the Alberta government, and we are the owner of this resource, oil and natural gas, we own about 85% of the resource, I have made it very clear that we are not going to stop our advocacy. What we hope to be is that source of solid information about our environmental record. And then by providing that validation and showing our work, showing our sources, we hope that we'll be able to give that same information to the other advocacy groups and industries so that we can all go forward together. But that's the situation we now find ourselves in, is that we're having to have a government take on the role of being the advocate, because they're crowding out the private voices, which I think has got to be the most illiberal approach to take to the discussion of these kinds of issues. So we are intending, on behalf of the industry, to challenge this from a constitutional perspective, and to challenge it as well from a charter perspective. And so as we put together that lawsuit, we will be reaching out to others to see if they want to join us as well, because we've had some success in beating back the federal government. It takes years, it takes a lot of money. That's why they do these things, is that because they have a period of time where it is the law of the land until you can get it struck down through the various stages of the court. And in the meantime, they put such a chill on investment that they achieve their target regardless, because they've just put it in as the fact by having it implemented in their parliament. It's so irresponsible.
What would happen if the oil companies, if the fossil fuel companies used information that you had already promoted?
That's what we're hoping.
Okay.
We're hoping that we'll be able to almost provide a shield that if we become, because you asked who sets the standards? Well,
Right.
guess what? I think we set the standard. I mean, we under our Constitution have the right to develop our resource and get them to market. And part of getting them to market is also making sure that we can tell the environmental message. Because the other part of it too, and I've spoken with energy executives about this as they're trying to navigate through it, they actually have an international requirement in reporting to their shareholders as publicly traded companies to talk about their environmental record. So you can't have both of those things. You have to be able to give them that latitude. So we are hoping to be able to provide them a bit of that shield and be able to also lead on the legal issues and the judicial issues. But make no mistake, there's only one reason why this was put into the legislation at the last minute, and it's because the Liberal government with their NDP supporters want to crush any confidence in developing our energy sector. They want to crush the production of oil and natural gas, even though they use weasel words to try to pretend otherwise. There's an agenda to keep it in the ground. We do not agree. We believe we can reduce emissions.
I think it is extraordinary that Mark Carney has become the Prime Minister of Canada. He did a terrible job in Britain.
Certainly under the Liberal leadership in Ottawa, they've done a disastrous job of assuring and increasing Canadian productivity. I think we're now down to 60% on average GDP production per capita compared to the US, with real estate that's twice as expensive, right? It's worse than, what's the state? I can't remember. It's the lowest ranking United States state. Canada is now equivalent to in terms of GDP productivity, and with much more expensive real estate. So that's just absolutely appalling. So do you think that underlying all this, like what the hell's driving this? Is this merely climate paranoia of the type that's fostered by the WEF? Is that what's going on? And is there an idea that's lurking in the back of what passes for the minds of people like Stephen Guilbeault, something like the promotion of degrowth, because that's actually the only way out of the climate catastrophe? Like, I don't understand what's lurking at the bottom of this precisely. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that matter.
Well, I think it goes back further. I mean, I started studying the environmental movement when I was an intern at the Fraser Institute in 95, 96. And it was just after some of the early climate conferences. But that's when I learned about the Rio Summit and the role that a Canadian by the name of Maurice Strong had played in asserting that we needed to put an approach on emissions reduction that was very aggressive. And there has been, I think even it goes back further than that to the Club of Rome concept, I think came out in the late 1960s. And earlier than that, the Paul Ehrlich and Limits to Growth, this whole notion that the world did not have enough resources to be able to keep up with the population growth, that we would ultimately outpace our ability to feed ourselves. That was sort of the flawed principle that came out of the late 1960s and early 70s. I mean, it was even, if you look at the culture and how it's shaped by movies, you may recall the movie Soylent Green, and it talked about a catastrophic future, which I think we've now superseded in the date that they expected it to happen, where we'd run out of food, so you had to have a manufactured product to keep people alive. And so this is I think the flawed premise that goes all the way back there. And it doesn't matter how much we're able to develop new resources and increase food productivity and outpace the global population with our production, they still stay with that flawed premise. And you hear it even today, where they talk about you need 5 Earths to be able to support the number of people that we have on the planet now. Well, it's just simply not true, because the way economics works is as something becomes more scarce and precious, someone will find a substitute product. And it's been the history that we always find a solution to be able to meet these concerns. That's how supply and demand works. So I think it goes back even further. And one of the reasons I mentioned Maurice Strong is he was an appointee in Justin Trudeau's father's era. in Pierre Elliott Trudeau's era. And I think that is the vision that our prime minister has, is he felt like that was a moment of relevance for Canada, is look at us. We are going to be the first to go forward on these kinds of aggressive policies. And it's the only way I can understand when he got reelected, for him to use the international forum he had to say Canada's back, and back in the worst possible way for Canadians, which is these taxes on productivity. I've actually heard the carbon tax referred to as a sin tax on productivity, which really helps to identify the way they look at the production of methane and carbon dioxide, and all of the attendant policies that have been put forward. We're far more aggressive than any of our trading partners in establishing net zero policies. By 2050, no, that's not good enough. It's got to be by 2035 or 2030, or we've got to have unrealistic targets to phase out combustion engine vehicles faster than anyone else. And I think it's really just this flawed interpretation of what it means to be relevant on the international stage. I mean, I think being relevant on the international stage for Canada means meeting our commitment on defense spending, being a reliable ally when we go into conflict zones, making sure that we have an effective immigration system so that we are able to assimilate people into our economy and not drive up and have massive inflation, manage our money supply, effectively manage our passports so that we can ensure that we've got those kind of documents available without months or years worth of waits. I mean, there's just some very practical things that we can see the federal government do to be relevant on the international stage, and yet they've chosen.
How about provide natural gas to Germany and Japan? It's like they asked.
100%. 100%. I mean, to have foreign, this is part of what I was observing before I got into this position, is that the world assumes when they come to Canada that the leader, the prime minister of the country, is going to be an advocate for the country and an advocate for the resource development. It's part of the reason we structured our country the way we did. We've given trade and commerce powers, and we've given international trade power agreements to our federal government to negotiate in our best interests on our behalf. And he's using it for the reverse. He's actually using it to put up trade barriers, not build the infrastructure that we need, and interfere with our ability to get our product to market. So it's part of the reason I've had to take the stance that I've had. It's not the role necessarily of a provincial premier, a subnational government, to have to go to the COP28 or COP29 international conferences. But if we're not there, our voice doesn't get heard, our story doesn't get told. We don't have an opportunity to talk to international trading partners, whether it's Germany or South Korea or Japan or India, about how we might be able to solve their energy security problems. So I found myself, as you've got a federal prime minister who seems to be more interested in doing my job, talking about dentistry programs and school lunch programs, I'm finding increasingly I'm having to do his job in reaching out to the world and making them know that we are going to be a trading partner, and we are going to be a secure supply of not only energy but food as well. So that's the weird upside down nature we find ourselves in Canada right now.
Oh yeah. We'll wrap it up there, gang. I'd like to remind everybody to like, share, subscribe my channel, but also check out Dr. Jordan Peterson's channel and Premier Danielle Smith's. They both put out a lot of great content. Thank you all so much for watching. Smash the like, hit subscribe, watch one of our other videos that are floating around here. Come and check out one of the live shows. That's it. Thank you for watching the video. We'll catch you in the next one.